Hello guys and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're looking at what's likely to be the 5th boss you'll see in Ny'alotha with the Hivemind encounter.
Yes, this fight has 2 bosses and a lot of adds. Mechanically it's a relatively simple encounter, but there are a fair amount of abilities going on. Anyway, let's jump straight into it.
So to start off, let's talk about the 2 different add types you'll be seeing throughout the fight. Drones will spawn randomly throughout the room, and they cannot be tanked and will just attack random targets. We decided to stack near the bosses whenever they spawned, so that they'd all funnel into a single meat grinder. On Heroic, when these drones die, they leave behind pools of acid that last a fair amount of time. The room is big enough for them to die pretty much wherever. Tanks just need to be ready to move the bosses if they die underneath them, so it's clear for the melee. Now the darters rush around the room and cast psionic resonance. This deals a small amount of damage to the entire raid. Now this can't be kick interrupted, however both darters and drones can be stunned, gripped, and almost anything else that you can think of when it comes to CC. So you'll want to use what you can to limit their cast and keep them locked down as all DPS swap to them immediately. Now the bosses throughout the fight will take turns at who is in control of the Hivemind. This changes how the bosses need to be tanked, and it also changes effects on the adds. Each time control of the Hivemind changes, the raid will take a fair amount of damage over 12 seconds, and this damage gets 15% stronger each time. Now Tekris always starts with control of the Hivemind, and when he's in control, the bosses must be kept within 20 yards of each other, or they and all of the adds will take 99% less damage. Also, all adds during this time will be gaining a 1% damage and movement speed increase every second. Now an ability that he will cast only when he's in control of the Hivemind is Accelerated Evolution. This will transform a random drone into a Ravager, increasing its health and damage by 450%. It will also now gain a threat table and will need to be picked up by a tank. It will cast Ravage on them, dealing physical damage to that tank over 20 seconds, and this can stack. So DPS just want to swap to this ad and kill it off before focusing on all the other drones. Now whilst the other boss, Khazir, is in control, the bosses need to be tanked further than 20 yards from each other, otherwise once again everything will take 99% less damage. All adds during this time will also begin to regenerate health when they drop below 20%, meaning that you need to actively finish off adds rather than just dotting them and ignoring them when they get low. Khazir's special ability whilst in control of the Hivemind is Volatile Eruption. A single drone will be buffed with an additional 150% health and start a 20-second cast whilst being immune to CC. If this cast goes through, the ad will explode, dealing massive raid-wide damage, so you want all DPS to swap and kill it off before this happens. For that particular set of drones, we found it pretty useful to stack next to this ad rather than the boss, because it was more important that that ad got absolutely annihilated rather than any of the bosses taking damage during this time. So whilst dealing with the ads, there are other things that the bosses will throw at you to deal with.
Khazir will frequently spawn acidic Akir. These spawn in eggs in random places around the edges of the room. Shortly after, Akir will spawn and roll across the room, and getting hit by one of these deals large damage and debuffs you with a nasty dot. The best way to avoid them seems to be just standing towards the edges of the room, and then that way you only need to dodge ones that are coming from the opposite side of the room, which gives you plenty of time to react. Khazir will also cast Mind-Numbing Nova. If this is not interrupted, it deals raid-wide damage and reduces your haste by 50% for 8 seconds. We set up a 2-man rotation just so this was always covered. As for Tekris, he will debuff players with Echoing Void. This deals a small burst of damage to you, but even more damage is applied to anyone within 4 yards of you, so spread the moment that they're applied just to keep the raid health safe. Tekris will also cast Nullification Blast. This is a frontal cone that deals a small amount of damage, but debuffs you with a moderate dot and healing immunity for 6 seconds. This seemed to only target the tanks, and the boss remains locked on its original location when the spell is cast, so you have plenty of time to sidestep it. But that's all the abilities for normal and heroic, but one thing to note is that the bosses need to die shortly of one another, because once they reach 1% health they'll begin to channel, and if that cast completes they'll be healed back up again, so it's vital that damage is split between them as much as you possibly can as the fight goes on. As for Mythic, there are 2 changes. The Echoing Void was leaving behind a patch when it timed out that then exploded shortly afterwards, which didn't always happen for whatever reason, and the eggs before they hatch are said to have an acid pool that grows out of them, which also didn't happen. So while we tested this boss on Mythic, we didn't really see any of the differences, and the fight kind of felt the exact same way as it did on Heroic. But anyway, what's our impressions of the encounter?
Yeah, ad fights are always pretty fun for DPS. There's a lot of room to haul here with crazy essences and loads of AoE talents, but it is important to note that you do want to bring some single target DPS just to burst down that Ravager and the drone casting the Volatile Eruption, because you don't want those things to get out of control. For everyone else, like non-DPSers basically, it's perhaps not as fun. Like tanks is pretty straightforward where you just move the bosses based on who's in control, and then of course you move from eggs and pick up the Ravagers and dodge the frontal cone. And healers is even more basic. You pretty much just move from eggs and don't hit players with your Echoing Void. You know, it's not too crazy. I guess towards the end of the fight when the Hivemind changes, there's a lot of raid damage, and that can kind of be fun trying to set up for that because it's on set timers. But aside from that, it's a little bit dull. But it probably doesn't matter all that much, really. It's a perfectly fine fight on normal and heroic, and it's not that long either. So hopefully it shouldn't be too dull for the non-DPS.
Yeah.
As for Mythic, it's kind of hard to say without seeing the acid pools from the eggs, but whilst testing it, yeah, as you said, it felt pretty much identical to Heroic, which is boring. I'm pretty sure they'll fix that in some way. I'm thinking that the eggs, when they are seeping that acid, hopefully it takes up a large amount of space, so you're kind of forced to move the raid towards the middle of the room. And of course, that means that you then need to quickly leave the middle of the room as all of the eggs start rolling across. And of course, you'll have other mechanics as well. Maybe the bosses need to be separated. Maybe you need to be spread for the Echoing Void. So because we didn't see those hard overlaps, it was kind of difficult to get a good feel for the fight.
Yeah.
So who knows until we see it. It's going to be interesting, and hopefully everything pans out.
But thanks for watching, guys. Drop us down a like if you enjoyed the preview, and before we go, make sure you do go check out our guide over on Wowhead. It's being updated as things change and as new strategies are formed, so do keep a close eye on it before you come to this boss on live servers. But thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.